Hello, this is Craig Camp, and welcome to Troon Talk, where we dig deeply into Demeter biodynamic and regenerative organic certified wine growing and farming at Troon Vineyard in Oregon's Applegate Valley. This is meant to be a podcast for those that aspire to, as the Regenerative Organic Alliance says, farm like the world depends on it. These interviews will be focused on our work here at Troon Vineyard, but will also include the work of other farmers committed to regenerative agriculture. And now for today's interview. Today we have some very special guests on our podcast. First of all, Garrett Long, our Director of Agriculture, is with us again. Hello, Garrett.
Why, thank you. Hello.
And we are extremely excited to have a very special guest, Elizabeth Whitlow, the Executive Director of the Regenerative Organic Alliance. So welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you. I am excited to be here with you too. Thanks
So
much.
So could you tell us a little about your background and how you ended up at the Alliance?
The stars aligned and a lot of luck. I had spent most of my career, my working career, working out here in California with CCOF. They're one of the largest organic certifiers in the country, and performed every different role there pretty much until a certain point there was nothing else to do unless I wanted to move to Santa Cruz, and I couldn't. And I live in Sonoma County. So I ended up leaving and working for a short time, administering and overseeing an animal welfare certification program that was all around the country. And then this opportunity came up. And I can tell you, Paul Dolan, who you all, I'm sure, know and remember, and he was on the board of the ROA, and I knew him from my days at CCF, and he kept saying, you should apply for this job. You should go for this job. And I looked at it and I said, I can't do that. I can do one of the three jobs, but I can't do all those things, Paul. It's not for me. And then he just talked to Rose. And so he connected me to Rose Macario, and I just first Phil Graves, then Rose, and I just fell in love with them and the whole idea and the mission. And I was just like, take me to the next person. I'm in. This is everything I have been waiting for and training for. And so I joined them in 2018, right before we did the pilot program. And I'll tell you more about the pilot later if you want, but that was it. And ever since then, I've been overseeing the launch of our program and the kind of global scaling of the regenerative organic certified movement.
Yeah, I would love to hear a little bit more about how the Alliance got started. You just mentioned Rose Marcario and Phil Graves from Patagonia. Patagonia played a really big role, as I understand, in getting this started. Who are some of the other players, and how did the Alliance form?
Yeah, well, the Alliance was formed in 2017, and it was a group of experts in farming, ranching, soil health, animal welfare, social fairness, equity, all of these different organizations and brands. They were all really involved, engaged in the organic sector, but they had some concerns about what was happening in organics. They were seeing the downward pressure. They were seeing the push to allow hydroponics, and they were seeing this allowance of factory farming of animals. And so this was Rodale Institute, Patagonia, Dr. Bronner's really spearheaded it. And then they brought in all these other entities. And they all came together at the Rodale Institute up in Pennsylvania. And they said, like, what can we do we want to continue supporting organic, but we want to do more in these other sectors, in these areas that organic was never meant to touch, like equity and worker fairness. So they came up with this concept, and then they kept inviting other stakeholders to the table, and that's how they dreamed up the Regenerative Organic Certified Framework, the first one that was released to the public in 2018. Got a lot of attention, a lot of pushback, a lot of farmers really angry because it said no till. And like clearly, as Jeff Moyer, the former chair of our board from Rodale said, like, and a lot of like tillage is a really important tool. And just like any tool, you can use it to like break down the walls or build the walls. And so tillage it's important, and you can't take away that really essential tool to a farmer. And so there needs to be some justified use of tillage, but you want to minimize your disturbance to the soil. So that was just one example of one of the really core criteria, and it got a lot of attention. And people were pretty, you know, farmers were upset, and the industry was upset. They didn't like that there's somebody like saying that there's something better than organic. So there was, at first, we weren't very well received by the organic sector, which was tough, honestly.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Garrett, you
Go ahead,
were
Craig, sorry.
involved in some of the early research when you were at Apricot Lane, right? Before you came to Troon?
Yeah, so I did, when I first got to know you, Elizabeth, that was when I was working at Apricot Lane Farms in Southern California. That was the beginning of
Wow.
my farming adventure, my first experience as a woofer and first experience farming. And Apricot Lane was invited by the Regenerative Organic Alliance to participate in the pilot program, among some other really wonderful pilot farms that maybe you could talk to us a little bit about. But yeah, that was the beginning of our collaborative relationship. And one thing that I thought was so special about that pilot program and about that early relationship was your desire for feedback. I guess that's sort of the point of a pilot program. But I felt
Yeah.
this incredible welcomeness, this desire for feedback, and the most critical feedback possibly. In fact, I
Totally.
was
Yeah.
invited to give this response at Expo West, in front of however many people attended that session, but 70,000 people at Expo West every year, at least, if not grown in the last few years. And I was invited back in 2019, I believe it was, or 18, to speak at that panel amongst other pilot farms and give some pretty critical feedback at the time that has been incorporated, and the standards have grown immensely. But yeah, let's go back. Can you talk a little bit about the start of the pilot program and who was involved?
Yes, I'd love to. And I really think fondly of that time, and getting to know you. You had just finished at UC Davis, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you
Mm-hmm.
were doing your wolfing, and you were there, and you gave such thoughtful, earnest feedback and questions. And it was really very eye-opening for all of us. And it was great to create this kind of a pipeline, or a way to get that feedback, solicit that from you all. And it it was also challenging to go through it. We had NSF International was our program manager, and they did a really great job with a lot of things, and running the task forces after the pilot was part of that. And taking in that feedback, there were these long spreadsheets with a lot of feedback, and it was tough to incorporate. I think a lot of yours got incorporated, and I still think we have a long ways to go to do better, to do more, to hear more. And we all just talked about this last week with some other of our rock vineyards about kind of some of the social fairness, the challenges in our social fairness criteria. So, it's really important to get that feedback. It's important to assess what's going on in the real world, and then see how we can bring this to life through the eyes of a standard, and through like this marketing program. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is. It's a marketing seal that we need consumers to see and recognize and feel really confident that when they buy that, and when they maybe spend some extra money on that, that they can be assured that this is the highest standard and it meets all their values. And so, there was always that constant play on that, like, oh, you don't want to lower the standard too much or change it too much, because if you set the bar low, then people will land low. And so constantly setting the bar high and seeing how high we can go is really, I think, one of our core kind of purposes there with the standard. And it seems to be working. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I actually had that as a question. How do you, as an organization and as a standards committee or standards board, maintain the world's most robust high bar standards of any certification program out there, while still maintaining or still incorporating feedback from your producers, who are sometimes very critical of the standards, and sometimes often say, I can't meet that. I can't do that. How is that even possible for any
Yeah.
farm? How do you work with that, and how do you maintain such high standards?
Well, we continue to, so if you look on our website on the resources page, you'll see the framework that we came to after the pilot. After we took in all the feedback, we revised it and we put that out there. And that's what we've been operating under. We have had to create several guidance documents for different crops and sectors that were not in the pilot, that really don't apply in some ways. Like, think of chia or quinoa in the highlands of Bolivia. Like, you can't do a crop rotation there. There's not like they're farming with the rain, it's rain fed agriculture. Same in a lot of the cotton producing areas. So we had to kind of modify or create these guidance documents. And so we have some guidances on there on our website that are being incorporated into the framework. And good practice is every few years, the standards need to be revised. And we're coming up on that point. And that's going to happen next year, in the next year. And while we're talking, it's just occurring to me that, I'm not sure why you're not on the Soil Health Committee, but Craig, with your permission, I'd like to invite Garrett back on that or nominate him back to
Absolutely.
the Soil Health Committee.
I'll volunteer Garrett anytime.
Okay, I'd like to nominate you back
Second.
on if you can, because we're going to have a lot of really important meetings in the coming year. And so what we have are these three committees: the Soil Health, Animal Welfare, and Social Fairness. And then we have a chair of each committee. We have some amazing chairs who are ensuring that we're getting appropriate representation on those committees and helping bring these have these issues discussed and make recommendations to us, to the staff, on changes to incorporate. Sometimes the recommendation has gone to the board, but we've moved into a kind of a different role with the board, more not so deep in the weeds of the standards and really looking for that expertise from people who work in this field and who can really provide us with that kind of feedback. And we also have an internal review committee. And so as much as we can, we have, there's 4 people on our internal review committee, and all told, all combined, we have like over 80 years of experience working in compliance, agriculture, and standards. And so there's a lot of really strong kind of expertise around that table internally. And we try to resolve things internally when we can. And then when we can't, it gets kicked to committee. And then if that wasn't resolved with committee, then we would go to the board and be like, okay, now we need some subject matter experts. We may need to hire some people or something like that. But that's the
So I think
structure.
that's really important structure as far as how you get it done. You're talking about these committees and these committees of experts in their respective fields. One of the unique things about the regenerative organic certification compared to other programs is it's built on those 3 pillars of soil health, animal welfare, and then social fairness or farmer and farm worker fairness, right? Can you speak to why that choice was made to expand what is usually seen as just sort of like organic farming practices? That's foundational to ROC, but then you moved beyond it with animal welfare and social fairness as well. Talk a little bit about the importance of those pillars, and also I think as relevant to this idea of committees and standards, how you brought in experts from respective fields to lend knowledge to those specific pillars.
Yeah. Well, first off, as I mentioned earlier, we established this program, with wanting to keep the organic program strong. And oftentimes we had some people from the organic sector who were really, influential in the earlier years. And they called it, putting the stake in the ground to keep organic from being further weakened. And I think since in the 5 years now, we've really come around full circle, and the organic sector is really embracing Regenerative Organic Alliance now and seeing that we are here to help keep organic strong. The reason that we have those 3 pillars, though, is like if you look and you consider some of our most pressing problems today that we all know very intimately is the climate crisis. I don't know anybody who's not affected by climate change. And, we're all in areas where there's wildfires that are really devastating and terrifying. And I consider myself a climate migrant. I sold my home. It was in a vulnerable area, and I was tired of running from wildfires. And I moved into a more settled area and a little bit more suburban so that I could not feel that pressure. And I'd rather live out in the country. But, it's something that we all face. And, so industrial agriculture and factory farming are top contributors to climate change. And so if we could address those 2 things with this program, then that alone would do a lot to help address some of our biggest problems. We also have issues with fractured rural economies, farmers aging out, dropping out, committing suicide, and leaving farming. How are we going to eat? We have got to make farming a viable pathway for someone, an interesting, viable pathway for people to want to go and grow food and grapes, of course. But that's another aspect. It's around kind of the social network, the social fabric of our communities are being shredded up by industrial farming and corporate ag going in there and just, owning all the land and making it really impossible for farmers to have a viable career. So I think, addressing that worker and farmer fairness, that's all part of that, trying to find solutions to some of these problems. I have a brand new kitty. He's very much a rascal right now. I'm sorry. I don't know if you saw him, he's like tearing me up down below. Sorry, I had to remove him.
No worries.
So yeah, I mean, like looking at farm workers are often exploited. They're, it's one of the most egregious problems we have in labor is that we have trafficked labor and child labor, children picking things, crops and cotton and all the things. Like we wanted to really address that. And so we're trying to address it in this global program. And it seems to really be working. We've got 60,000 farm workers now covered under our program, and we're at about 15 and a half or 15 point something million acres. So I'm really proud of how far we've come. And, when we were working together, Garrett, there were 19 pilots, I think 19 farmers. There were about 24 that applied, and then a few of them pulled out. And we ended up with about 19 around 8 countries. And at the end of that time period, I think we had 15 of those farmers were certified and were able to make certified claims on a product or their crops. And so since then, that was 2020. And then we did our soft launch at the end of 2020, in the middle of this insanity of a global pandemic and not being able to travel and all the unknowns that we experienced as humanity on this globe was like, wow, every country was touched by COVID. And we couldn't really get out and see our farms until, we soft launched in 21 and it was real slow go. And so it was really in 22 that we hit the ground running, and we've come a long way in 2 years. It's kind of amazing to me.
I remember, kind of when the pandemic was getting started and then those first 6 months, a lot of what was breaking down in terms of supply chain was food production. It was these big factory farms. It was these big meat processing plants that had to shut down. And all of a sudden, a lot of Americans, or even just like a lot of everybody in the world, just all of a sudden couldn't eat because big ag was shut down by COVID.
Yeah.
But the people that I was around and the people I was talking to in my community who are smallholder farmers, who are, homesteading or farming diversified small plots of land and doing vegetable production and integrated animals. And these are the people who are relatively resilient through a global pandemic. And I think these are exactly the types of farms that ROC is trying to certify and trying to onboard, whether you're a couple of acres or whether you are a larger sort of more corporate held brand that is still farming in this way.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, that put the spotlight on our vulnerable areas where we didn't know if you were a person who didn't have farms nearby or lived in a food shed with a thriving farming economy, you were not eating very well. And I think all of us probably were doing just fine. Yeah.
So, Elizabeth, we're obviously very committed to regenerative organic certification here at Troon and honored to be one of the 4 gold certified farms. Could you just outline the certification itself and the levels and what that means to someone that's buying a product?
Yes. Well, I mean, I think one thing I've come to call it lately is it's like the equivalent of the Good Housekeeping seal of approval for the planet. And a consumer can know when they're buying that it is representing the highest standard for organic agriculture in the world, and that it's going to address a whole suite of values that they come shopping with. And if you look at the categories of all the certifications now on products and how much label reading consumers have to do, it's exhausting. There's so many bugs on the labels. It's pasture raised, it's cage free, it's grass fed, it's organic, it's Demeter, it's climate friendly, it's all these things, and it's pretty overwhelming. They're regenerative, there's so many regenerative claims out there. So the ROC, the Regenerative Organic Certified Claim, is something that is certainly the highest bar a consumer can find that will meet all of these things to preserve the planet, help the people, and help the farmers be viable. And that bronze, silver, gold levels of our certification, the whole intention was to build in this concept of continuous improvement and not just talk about it. There's a lot of talk about continuous improvement, but in, like, say, in organic, once you get certified, you're good. There's no ceiling, there's no floor, you're there. That's great, because it is hard to get organic certified, but still, it is something that we want to aspire to be better and to get better and to continue to improve. And so our levels build this in where, like, at bronze level, you need 3 crop rotations before you come back to your cash crop. At silver, it's 4, and at bronze or gold, it's like 7. That's really hard. For vineyards like you have to have multiple different types of cover crops in between your vine rows or in between the perennial rows. And this is all around encouraging biodiversity and encouraging that development, which Garrett can really talk about. I'll scratch the surface here, but Garrett can run with this one, like as far as what's going on underground in the soil with all of these different roots and what's happening in the soil microbiome, and where all the magic is really happening on the earth is in that soil microbiome, and bringing those nutrients to the plants and helping them thrive and be more resilient and have more beautiful crops and be tastier and more nutrient dense, all those things. And I can get more into the gold if we don't go down the rabbit hole of the soil, whatever you like to do.
It's tempting, but I think our listeners can just listen to episodes 1, 4, 6, and 12 of the True Talk podcast, where I geek out at length about soil health and microbes.
Can't wait to listen to this, so then I'll stay focused on this. So with the gold, there's all these other criteria require different levels. It's really tough to get to gold. And we actually had to put a stop on it for any operations in their first year. And we're only allowing people to apply for gold after they've been with us 2 years. Because when somebody is presented with this option, well, do you want to go for gold? Or are you gold? Everyone's like, yeah, hell yeah, I'm gold. And then they come to find out it's really hard. And our requirements on that social pillar, as we discussed last week, I think those really need re-examining. And we currently require third-party certification for the social pillar in the global north and south. And I think it's just not fair because there aren't many options. There aren't any options, really. There's one option, the EFI program, in the global north. And so we need to either find more options or do more training for the auditors so they can do that certification of the social pillar. And it is one of the complicating things with our standard. We require organic, or the international equivalent to NOP organic, as a baseline of entry. If you have commercial livestock, you have to have one of 3 recognized animal welfare certifications. And for the social, there's 7 different recognized social certifications. And so it really adds burdens to the farmers that I don't want to add. And I really am focused on improving our ability to train the auditors who represent our program, so they can do the full ROC audit, and they do them bundled. The idea is to do them at the same time as the organic audit. So you all aren't having to schedule 2 different audits on 2 different days and have 2 different inspectors come in and have to get familiar with your operation.
And I think that's one of the things that attracted me to the regenerative organic certification is the concept of constant improvement. You know, it's not just that you're not doing damage, it's that you're actually in the process showing over the years you're making things better. And it's not enough just to keep things the same. We have to make them better.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
I can say that
that's
just
the word, you know, to regenerate. It's like, that's what it comes down to if we want to get into like the semantics of that. And a lot of people talk about Bob Rodale, who was the one who famously coined this term regenerative organic. And he was like being interviewed somewhere, and he's like, he used this comparison of like, well, with your marriage, like, do you just want to sustain your marriage? You just want to sustain it day to day, keep it the same, or do you want to make it better? And so that was kind of a common reference. But I'm sorry, Garrett, what were you going to say?
Well, no, I want to go down that path a little bit because I wanted to talk more about the name and the selection because as you called out earlier, there are quite a few claims, regenerative claims being made out there, including relatively new certification programs
Yeah.
rolling out all the time. You guys were the first, as I understand it, to use the word regenerative, and you decided to pair it with regenerative organic. And just a real quick anecdote. I remember when when Apricot Lane was contacted to be a part of the pilot program, and I was just finishing UC Davis and my master's degree in soil science there. I was privileged to be a fly on the wall of an email thread. I was forwarded an email thread where there was a discussion about the name and sort of what this program wanted to call it. And I remember like looking through the like CC list of who was on that email, and it wasn't just it was everybody. It was folks from Patagonia, it was folks from the Rodale Institute, it was folks. I remember David Bronner was chiming in directly,
Always.
Vandana Shiva.
Yeah.
They were just like
Lau,
big name
Ratan Lau.
celebrities. Yeah,
Yeah,
Ratan Lal,
Ratan Lau was
exactly.
very involved. Yeah, yeah, that's
And I
true.
remember a very lively, impassioned discussion over email where I was just reading like a
I love
hundred
that.
comments. Yeah, it was
I
so
want
cool. And
that
I of
email,
course,
Garrett. I never saw
I
it.
know I'm gonna dig it back up. I'll forward it to you if I can still find it in my UC
Oh,
Davis thread. But I remember being a really engaging discussion, and I would love to hear from you from the perspective of those early days and the selection of regenerative organic. Why regenerative organic, and what? Yeah, why?
yeah. Well, I can tell you when I first came on, I was like, oh my gosh, like, could we have come up with a better name? Because this is a mouthful. And we were trying to get we were applying for the trademark. And so
Mhm.
and we have it. We've earned the USPTO in US, EU, Canada, UK, and we're about to get Madrid Protocol, which it would be like 133 more countries. It was pretty tough battle to get recognized for that trademark, but we did it, and I think it's a testament to the founders and how they had. I didn't know about this email you're talking about. I wish I could have seen that. And yeah, so I mean, I always saw inherently the need to keep them together. And from my years in the organic sector, like I spent thousands of hours with farmers at their farm table, at the back of the pickup truck, doing their audits, driving around the fields with them. And organic farming, it's not just a rubber stamp, and it's not it's not just a list of what you can't do, like critics like to say. That's not necessarily true. I think there's some areas where we've got some issues in organic, where we've got hydroponics, where we've got industrial livestock, and where you've got some of those operations that are not doing that are doing heavy tillage and a lot of mechanical tillage. But organic is still really important, and especially when you look at the materials that you're applying to the soil, and if you don't have some restrictions and use that long 40-year-old list of organically approved materials as the minimum baseline, like these are the things you absolutely cannot, like these are the list of materials that you're allowed to use in organic. And that is better than what we're looking at now with regenerative, where they're terminating their cover crop with Roundup and they're calling it regenerative. This is a problem. And this is the problem that the founders were concerned about early on, that regenerative would become a huge buzzword. And there would be this downward pressure, and people would be like, yeah, I do a cover crop and then I use Roundup and terminate it. And it's good to go. And it's called regenerative. And so we really saw the need to keep that attachment to organic. And so that's, I wasn't the fly on the wall that you had the privilege to see that conversation unfold. I wish I could have, but it's made more and more sense to me every year, and more so now than ever, because there's like 5 new regenerative certifications, and
Mhm.
there's not prohibition on use of herbicides in those. In fact, in the textile sector, I was in DC last year at a conference, and I heard one of these regenerative cotton farmers from Louisiana talking about, yeah, well, some of our clients, they want the GMO free cotton, and then our other ones, they want Roundup free, glyphosate free, and trying to satisfy. I'm like, wait a minute, so you're regenerative, but you use GMOs and Roundup? Like, how do those go together? What are you doing that's regenerating the soil? And that's what
Yes.
Rodale science has really proven time and time again, is when we apply these synthetic pesticides, herbicides, and synthetic fertilizers, nitrogen, that we are destroying the soil microbiome. And that, you know everything
Mhm.
about that. So I'll stop
Mhm.
there.
So I'm just, the word regenerative, much like the word sustainable, has certainly been taken down the greenwashing path. But you're on a committee in California where you're trying to actually define that term. How is that going?
Yeah, that's been fascinating. So that is the California Department of Food and Agriculture. We found out last year, like right at the end of summer, that the state was going to be defining regenerative. And I'm like, oh no, what's going on? Like, I'm not sure how I got invited, but I was invited to present to the Food and Ag Committee. And so I went to Sacramento and presented to this group. As it turns out, one of the Food and Ag Committee members is a very proud ROC operation, the Bryce Lundberg,
Yeah.
and they brought in thousands of acres and all their family vineyards and all the vineyards they buy, or the vineyards, rice that they buy from. And they're big advocates for regenerative organic certified, and Bryce is on the committee. And so he must have had something to do with getting me invited. But I went and I presented to the committee, including the Secretary of Agriculture, Karen Ross, on our definition for regenerative and why we attach it to organic and what our growth has been and what's been happening, who's with us. And I think she was pretty shocked at the growth and like how much we had going on and how many countries we're in. And I don't think that this committee was fully aware yet of the traction that regenerative was getting in the marketplace and around the world. And I just said to them, like, listen, before it's too late, can't you just back away from this? Like, can't you just call it agroecological or holistic or something? Do you really need to get into this? Because there's an existing market for regenerative. You're going to really muddy the water. And it's worrisome. Like, I don't know how the state could define it in a way that is going to uphold and support all the organic farmers in this state and is going to not damage the work that the ROA has been doing. And I'm worried that by you defining it, you're going to allow a lot of greenwashing to happen. And so you should be really careful and back away. And they were like, no, Elizabeth, we're definitely not backing away. We're way down this road already. We've had a scientific advisory panel and they're deep in it. And so then they asked me to be on the working group, which was awesome. And so there's 13 of us on the working group, and we just had our last working group session last week. And there's going to be another listening session. When does this podcast air?
In about 2 weeks.
That'll be right. It'll probably be on the same day as CDFA hearings. So the next listening session, I think the final listening session is number 5 will be Thursday, August 22nd at 5 p.m. So if your podcast airs on the 21st, we can tell people right now, hey, go to the listening session and make sure to give comments to the current definition that is going to be proposed. We were able to get organic into the definition, but not as a baseline, but as a point of reference. And I was happy for that. That was an achievement. And we also have a lot of targets. So the idea of the state definition is, number one, it's for California programs and policies that are funded by this state and by these taxpayers in this state. That's really important. And they have said repeatedly, we are not trying to do a certification. We don't want to do a marketing program. This is about state programs like the Healthy Soils Act or things like that. And so helping reward farmers who are doing regenerative practices by giving them more support, more resources, and giving them priority procurement. If you're qualified as a regenerative farmer, the university will have maybe be given more resources to procure foods from regenerative farms. And so this is trying to move farmers along to help the state meet its climate goals. We've got some pretty ambitious climate goals down here. And I say down here, but out here, wherever people are. And the governor of the state also has really ambitious goals to transition our farming sector to more organic. So this is a point I kept bringing up. Like, well, is this contrary to the state's own goals, to the governor's goals? And so I think the definition does, it doesn't give as much credit to organic farmers as I wanted it to, but it's not over yet. So you're welcome to make comment. And most of the public comments that came in were very much in favor of, and a lot of them expressing disbelief that regenerative wouldn't include organic. People expect that, and they don't know that regenerative, mainstream regenerative, doesn't necessarily include organic.
Yeah. I think I will join the CDFA in being impressed by the attraction that ROC has had. I mean, you mentioned 15 million acres certified, more than 60,000 workers covered
Yep.
under the program. I can reflect back to those early days, feeding back, providing our feedback on the program, and I remember some of the critical feedback I was giving was that it's really expensive. That the way the framework is to achieve an organic certification as the baseline, and then go and get an additional outside animal welfare and social fairness certification.
Yeah.
And only then are you eligible for ROC in a way. Like at this point, it's ROC Gold for all of those different outside certifications. That can be pretty expensive, especially for a small farmer who's maybe struggling to pay just for organic or something like this. And this was many years ago, and I think you guys have beautifully incorporated that feedback. But the gist of what I was trying to communicate was it's really expensive, and what I was encouraged by you to say that was originally between the lines, and you're like, no, just say it, is that this might not move the needle. This will only be available for big farms with big pots of money behind, and they're really value driven organizations like Patagonia or Bronner's that will really, fund this effort, but it may only be available to those big guys. And I think what we've seen, and maybe you could speak more specifically to this, is that it's not just available to the big guys. There is still a premium attached to it, and you can attach a premium to the products, but there are a lot of smaller farmers that are accessing ROC as well.
Yeah, totally. I'm actually always surprised at that. When I see smaller farmers coming, and there's people who are just committed to these ideals.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what really kind of makes me tear up a bit. Like even this morning, this woman, Razia, she is, she's been working against all odds, very much a disadvantaged female farmer in Silicon, like down around Central California on 20 acres. And she's just super committed to it. She really loves the principles in it, and she doesn't necessarily need it. She's not trying to sell a value added product, but she wants to be in the program. Also about some of the brands, like some of these new up and coming brands that have gotten secured a regenerative organic certified crops, they're getting distribution in 500 plus Whole Foods stores. They would not have gotten that distribution without the ROC seal. Whole Foods really prioritizes them. So Lil Bucks is a really great example. This woman was eating buckwheat groats while traveling in Australia, and she's like, wow, we don't eat these in America. These are so good. There's like so many reasons buckwheat groats are good for us, right? And they're good for the soil, and they're great for the bees. So she comes home and she starts seeing how she can develop a supply chain of buckwheat and buckwheat groats. And so now our farmers in the Midwest are having a demand for a crop that is a great crop rotation. And so there's things like that have happened. Rye is seeing a resurgence, heirloom wheats, and I think beans in the future. Beans are going to be really exciting. There's going to be a lot of really cool stuff happening. And there's these very innovative brands bringing products to market. And they're using, it's part of this whole movement, and they're getting a premium. And there's data that is showing the purchasing of rock in the marketplace. Like we work with a couple of market research firms, and they're always analyzing the sales. We supply them with all our SKUs of all the products. We have over 1,600 products now listed with a ROC ingredients. And they are assessing the sales of those SKUs, and they're showing us, like, I don't know what it was. I don't know what the last was, but it was like a 25% increase year to year last year. And I haven't seen it yet this year. And of course, it's easy to increase 25% from nothing or one. Like that's going to be easy. But like we were at 40 or 50 million in sales in just like that was just from the year before last. So that was our first year of getting out in the ground. So just wait till next year. And we've got a lot of other exciting news coming up really soon. We'll probably be announcing later on, right around the time that you release this podcast. I hope to get my newsletter out and making some other exciting news, kind of announcements and changes and plans for growth. And yeah, there's a lot of good things coming our way for sure. And I think we're just going to keep growing bigger and bigger, and it's going to be fun.
Well, that's exciting that you are actively involved, obviously, with retailers and restaurants. And in fact, you were talking to one of our important customers, Erewhon, just recently. What kind of reaction are you getting from the retail market towards regenerative organic certified products?
Well, I also saw you at the PCC Market event that you came to, and I was so glad they invited you.
They're a good customer too.
They're lovely, and we did that. We pulled together that event, and it was really cool. Their staff are so educated and informed and inspired by. They just really understand what's going on in food, and they care a lot. And so do their 150,000 members in the Seattle area. There's a lot of kind of that whole like natural food co-ops and natural food stores. There's Good Earth down here in the Bay Area, Erewhon, Jimbo's, there's Mom's, there's like multiple markets. And then we've got Whole Foods and Sprouts, and the retailers are pretty excited about this because they're hearing about it and they've got consumers wanting it, and we're going to give them more tangible ways to talk about it. We have a marketing task force that is currently working on kind of revising and uplifting our current messaging, and it's going to be great. I think it's we should have all that ready to share in the next month or two. There's a lot of things coalescing right now around kind of aiming for Climate Week, and in September for Climate Week we've got a really exciting feature on ROC that will be happening that's I think going to draw potentially millions of consumers to our website and to our program. And so get ready. I think things are going to get pretty busy. And we just like, for us, the biggest pain point is serving the demand that we currently have at the door, because we've had pretty limited capacity. As you know, when I started, Garrett, it was mostly me, and then me,
and you, yeah,
and then me,
yep.
And then we got in more, and then we had like, two more, and then three more, and then 4 or 5. Now we're at like 14 amazing people, and it's been great, and we keep growing, but there's certainly been some growing pains, and I've been probably the cause of all the growing pains, because number one, I'm not a fundraiser. I don't know how to go get the millions of dollars that we need to really build our capacity. So that's going to be a big focus for us coming up. So because we have these farmers, if we could just help the farmers on the ground more, like Rodale does that, but I think we could do more to help farmers. We could do workshops all the time, webinars, and support farmers in getting certified. If we could find ways to support the financials, like the cost of it, that would be amazing. We've done a lot, but there's a long way to go. So yeah,
let's talk a little bit more about what your goals are and what you see for the future. I mean, as flattered as we would be for you to make a big announcement on the True Talk podcast, it's okay if you want to wait for your newsletter, that's fine. But I'm curious, for 2025, you mentioned you're going through a standards revision process. That's an exciting or a big undertaking, massive undertaking, I'm sure. What else do you see on the horizon for the certification?
Well, we will keep expanding. I'm going to project we're going to get to 30 million acres. Let's aim for that by the end of next year. And we're going to bring on more certifiers. We're already bringing on 2 more in Europe. We're developing a lot in Europe. I'm very excited about the promise and potential in Europe. And I wish you could come to one of those 2. So the week of October 7th, I'll be there for the LVMH World Living Soil Forum, and then right after that going to Telmont in Provence for another 2 days of work with climate activists and change agents in this work. And I think we're gonna pull together a field day and bring some other ROC farmers in Europe to speak there. And then we're working with this brand in Holland who's very excited about this. They had like a series of graduate students, 6 of them do this whole analysis of all the regenerative programs going on, and they reached out and then they started talking to us, and we've been working with them, and they're really envisioning a big kind of movement in Europe, so much that they're suggesting to me that we need a whole new structure, we need a European arm of the ROA and all these things. So who knows what'll happen there. But the thing we'll be announcing later this month, I mean, I can share some of it with you all, is just that idea that we need more capacity, we need more structure, we need somebody who can really do that, who can really build and scale this in a way that I haven't quite been able to, but I'll still be right there involved and doing I would love to be in working on that standards revision process more closely and things like that are closer to my heart than like the fundraising and the operational aspects that need a lot of attention. So yeah,
it's very exciting.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is important about becoming certified is that it really forces you to evaluate everything you're doing. The structure to achieve it, and it makes you smarter as a farmer, and as you go through this process. And it's interesting here is where we with our no-till goals, is when we replanted the vineyard, our goal was basically to be no-till by year 3. And we really learned that you can't apply one recipe to every block.
Yeah.
And if we hadn't gone through that process trying to do that, I don't think we would have learned as deeply how to evaluate each section of the vineyard and how to then roll out that strategy. Garrett, I mean.
Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely true. I think the uniqueness of every vineyard presents its own challenges and opportunities, and there is no blanket approach. There's certainly no blanket approach for this acre versus this acre here at our little farm in the Applegate Valley. And if you try to expand any sort of other blanket approach to farms or farming systems, other crops or other regions, you encounter all kinds of other challenges. Maybe you can speak to the challenge, Elizabeth, again, of trying to create a set of standards that the whole world, every producer in the program will abide by, and yet there's such need for nuance and specific choices.
Yeah. Well, I've always been amazed at how the criteria keep working with only subtle tweaks. Like with rice paddy production, we needed a lot. We had professors from several universities in Japan. I got to go to Japan on this whole tour last year that was mind-blowing. We had the Lundbergs, we had Lotus, we had a lot of different experts and from the southeast of the US, Rodale brought people, and we talked all about like, how can you do paddy rice in a regenerative way? Because there's a lot of potential areas that don't jive with the standards as they are, the current criteria. So we had to create a whole new guidance for that. And that was one that was pretty significant. But most crops have been pretty well adapted to it with slight guidance. And I think just that in broad terms, thinking of regenerative ag in this very holistic systems approach to appropriate farming in the context of that farm's very unique situation in this world, in this beautiful planet of that soil type and that valley and that microclimate and the cultural practices in that region, like that all matters. And so how we can find ways to bring that together into the language of the framework is really important, and always keeping that as this kind of overarching definition is important.
Yeah, in biodynamics, right? We call that the farm's individuality, right? Each farm organism is this unique has a unique individuality.
Yeah.
And I just Yeah, and ditto what Craig was saying. I think that these standards are high bar for a reason, and they have challenged us and everybody else who strives for gold or even just strives to become certified at any level to challenge ourselves to think innovatively, to think creatively about addressing problems. And the standard, I really do encourage everybody to go out and read the standards. We encourage our staff members, especially all of our managers, to be fully familiarized with the standards. And it's such a cool thing that that's just publicly available. Talk about the importance of a consumer-facing standard. Any
Yeah,
consumer can look at that rock logo on, their Lundberg rice or, Troon wine as an example, and know exactly what's going on in that farm. They can
yeah.
understand. And I think that that is so important from a consumer standpoint to just be familiar with what those standards are and what it really takes to achieve at this high level.
And that burden is on us, to do it, to be the voice for all the brands that we serve and all the farmers, because really we are at the very core, we serve the farmers. It is brand driven, but it's in service to farmers and helping ensure that consumers start to see that seal and they recognize what it means is really important. And I'm just going to grab it real quick right here, because this is something we've been talking about in that marketing group. And if you look at that and you think about this RO, and then this is kind of like the C, that big circle, and it's circular and it goes down and then like into this plant, these three leaves representing those three pillars. And like, how can we bring this to life more to give this so that people just see this and snap, they got it. Like you do the USDA logo, you do. And so this is on us and we're working on it. I think we've got a really awesome person who's helping us with that kind of communication, creative on that. And so I'm excited to share that with everyone in the next month or so. That'll be cool. And I want to know one thing from you guys, because I would love to be a fly on the wall working with the two of you. And I think you've been now, how long have you been up there, Garrett? And how did you all come to decide to work together?
Well, I'll just say that I've been here for 3 years. I arrived in August of 2021, but Troon was certified at the silver level,
Yeah.
Craig, in 2021. Was it that first?
Yes.
Yeah.
First year.
So can you speak to that? How Troon became interested in ROC?
Well, I got here in 2016, and there was a range of problems with the vineyard that had been conventionally farmed for many years, and at that time I felt that biodynamics was the best foundation and strategy to move forward to address the health issues on our farm. And so we were certified in 2020 with Demeter Biodynamic, and then the ROC program started, and it appealed to me right away. First of all, as I mentioned before, the whole idea of continual, actual, measured improvement, I think, is very important. The social welfare aspect, as we all know, agricultural workers are abused in a very significant way around the world, even in the United States, and so the agriculture and the animal welfare side, as a biodynamic winery, we were pretty much there already, as to achieve those. But the idea of a continuous improvement touching all these levels, but also perhaps with a more scientific base than biodynamics, would encourage other farmers. A lot of people are hesitant to take on biodynamics that will adopt ROC. And what's important is that we get people to farm this way, as your wonderful slogan says, Elizabeth, farm like the world depends on it, is that's our goal. I mean, we can't, we have 100 acres here. That 100 acres on its own is not going to change the world. But if we can show people that this is a viable way to not only be good to the environment, but to actually produce a higher quality product. And that's what led us down this road originally. As my first goal when I introduced biodynamics was to make better wine. And now that it's extended through, and we see that result not only in the wine, but in our produce, our fruit trees, and everything on our very biodiverse farms. So, the way you start this voyage isn't always the way you end up practicing it, because you learn and mature in your practice. So I think that now we're on a much different level where it's more ingrained in the total culture of the company and the farm, not just a end goal to make a better wine.
It's so many kudos to you for arriving there and bringing that that new mentality and that new approach, Craig. And then finding Garrett must have been a real gift as well, to like the two of
Yes.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's quite a project, Garrett. We've been talking about ways to refine our practice and to be more efficient about it, because it is demanding, especially when you're trying to do multiple crops like we are, and
Yeah.
at a very high level. So,
Yeah.
but then the other wonderful thing is that, the other people that practice Tablas Creek, of course, comes to mind. We have a very close working friendship with them, and with the goal, everybody shares everything. I mean, there's no secrets. If anybody comes to ask us any questions, well, how do I learn to become a regenerative organic farm? We're an open book. We're there to help, and the idea is to get more people to do it. So it becomes culturally. I say you start to work on the fertility of the soil, but eventually you build up the whole the human aspect too becomes equally developed.
Yeah. I think I was gonna comment, Craig, when you're talking about how our quality has improved in the wine and in the produce. It's detectably better. The sensory experience is so much better year after year. We notice this. And one other way that we're noticing it is in our soil health tests. That's one of the ways that Rock requires their farmers to demonstrate that continual improvement, is to do robust lab analysis every 3 to 5 years. And we had an outfit out of Napa called Soil Technologies come in 2017 when the farm was first purchased, and dig backhoe pits all over the farm and analyze the soil and do really, really robust soil analysis in preparation for vineyard redevelopment. When I arrived in 2021, one of my first goals as a soil scientist, holding this master's from UC Davis, was I wanted to get into the soil and revisit a lot of those same soil pits and those same sites that were now 4 years old. So not only was it a requirement of our certification, it's just a good farming practice to go out there and do and measure soil health. And we were measuring soil health at depth as well. So we were taking different horizons of the soil. The top 8 inches was where our sort of the topsoil is at our farm, and then 8 to 18 inches was another layer of subsoil, and then 18 to 36 inches. And we've seen immense improvement in soil organic matter and in carbon sequestration, really, really measurable improvements over a 4-year period, which is really what you hope to see, especially at depth, which is really an important, interesting finding of this. That's really borne out in so much academic literature, that it's these deeply rooted perennial plants like grapevines or like our apple trees or like our food forest, as it becomes more established. It's at depth, even in our pastures, really, our deeply rooted perennial pasture grasses. It's at depth that we're seeing these incredible improvements in soil organic matter. And, as I think about that quantified metric of improvement in soil health, it's harder to quantify, but I think it really speaks to the improvements in company culture, in our enjoyment, and how we approach our work and our collaborative effort. I'm very blessed to live on the property and walk out of my door and experience the sunrise here and the sunset here. And it's a real blessing to have this opportunity. I think it's a part of our social fairness, building up my own benefit here, a unique benefit to live on site. But I guess the point is, it's a harder metric to quantify, how improving company culture and improving not just products you can measure, soil health you can measure, but how you measure sort of employee happiness, those are harder metrics. But I do think it's part and parcel to the entire ROC program.
I love that. And I've heard that from others, the Tablas in particular. We talk about that a lot, really. And Gergich down here. Do you all know Evo?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Evo talks a lot about that too. Is like and he's, I don't know if you've seen him give a presentation, but he's pretty funny with and as I won't try and deliver his humor, but he does really focus in on this idea like, hey man, what do you expect if you don't treat your workers well? You think they're going to care about your operation? They're going to care about your equipment or a leak in the irrigation? Like when worker morale is down and people don't care, they're not going to be as attentive, and so productivity goes down. And then about just retention, when you get to retain people, you don't have to train new people, and that comes at a huge cost. So it's, I think that's a really something that a lot of our farms experience, and that makes me really excited. And yeah, it is hard to quantify. We don't really have any good KPIs for that, even though we do ask you all to provide certain key performance indicators at audit. It's been done pretty, we really need to revisit that list as well. And that's something I want to do next year. It's another area of improvement. So in September, we're going to do a webinar with this group called Land Banking Group and Agrology and Bonterra. And so Bonterra has been using Agrology's equipment on the ground to measure the soil carbon respiration and doing all these assessments on the ground, kind of the ground truthing piece. And then land banking is using a lot of satellite imagery to assess vegetation and soil type and things like this to look at CO2 sequestration potential, at water and biodiversity. And so in my dreams, in the coming years, we'll be able to really lean in on some of these other new kind of emerging technologies that address things like assessing the health of the soil microbiome, or bioacoustics, using AI to, there's these little recorders that they're putting in the morning to get the bioacoustics, get a recording of the bird songs and the insects that are chirping, and you can extrapolate from that the health of an ecosystem. And those are things like I'm really excited about, because I don't know how else we can measure it. And what we currently ask is that the farmers tell us about all like the most commonly recurring native flora and fauna. Like, you may not even know it. And do the inspectors know it? I don't know. We don't, it's imperfect what we're doing now, but we're trying, and we'll keep trying. And always your feedback is going to be really helpful on that. So I'm excited that you would be interested and willing to join that soil health committee, because I'm going to be knocking on your door.
I would love that. I'd be flattered.
Well, Elizabeth, you've, in just a few years from a pilot program, the regenerative organic certification has gone to become international with millions of certified acres. It has to have been a really rewarding voyage for you and your team.
Yes, it's we are so proud, and we've got a great board, very engaged. David Bronner, like you noted, Garrett, that he was, you could see he's deeply engaged. And Paul Lightfoot is the new chair of our board, somewhat new, and he's from Patagonia Provisions, and he's highly motivated to source only ROC wheat and kernza for their pasta, crackers, and beer. And they've changed their whole product line. They've gotten rid of all the different multi-ingredient products they had, and they're just focusing on these so that they can really focus on ROC. And then also on canned fish. Those cannot be ROC. But them, and then the new CEO at Rodale is Jeff Catch. So we have kind of a lot of new energy on our board, or new kind of voices around the table, and and new staff coming on all the time. And so yeah, I think it's going to be a really great year for us, and we're going to keep growing and also striving for sustainability for our team members, including me. So so that we all can have a life and have some fun along the way, which I love to do. And I'm going to get to see you all. So I'm going to have fun when I see at least one of you down in Southern California, hopefully. And it probably won't be Garrett, since he has a baby on the way.
Right.
That's right. That's right. I would love to be there in France with you, but unfortunately, I believe those dates overlap with our expected due date of our first. So,
oh yeah, France. But then I'm also thinking of the potential event that we're going to do at Erewhon.
There went.
So
Oh yeah.
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 No,
That
I
looks-
think we look forward to all of these collaborations. Any way that we can engage is so exciting for us. We can make a big impact on these 100 acres, but the real impact is, as you see, is when you really start to share transparently your practices, your experiences, how your
yeah,
quality of life is improving, as well as your soil health and the quality of wine. I think that's like getting out there and communicating that message is really where we start to move the needle. And you guys just, kudos on your effort to accomplish that.
thanks. Well, to you all, because I know you're real leaders and people are always looking at Troon, and you're setting that bar and showing by your example. And so whether it's 100 acres or 1,000 acres, it's making tremendous impact. And I wish someday we could have, and maybe we'll get enough staff to have like small groups by sector, kind of like
Mhm.
Craig, like the OTA Wine Council that we're on. Like, could
Mhm.
we have a working group, or just like a way for our wine grape growers to communicate? Or is it, people have asked us before, can we have a listserv? Or and then I'm like, we don't have staff to moderate the listserv. And then what if like some farmers are on there going off on some crazy idea and we can't say, oh no, you can't do that, or I don't know if it could really happen or if it would be useful. But I definitely feel like the community really yearns more time together to talk and share knowledge
And celebrate.
and celebrations. Yeah.
So Elizabeth, for people that want more information, what websites and things like that do you recommend?
Well, come to ours, regenorganic.org, Rodale. They've got a lot of great information, great resources, field days. They're doing Mad Ag is another, they're a friend of the organization. They're based in the center of the country over in Colorado, but they do a lot of really great work. But yeah, come to our site, sign up for our newsletter. We don't fill your inbox. We're only once a month usually. Yeah, that's it.
We'll put a link to that newsletter in the show notes, so
Great. Yeah.
we'll get to it. Well,
And
thank you for all you do, Elizabeth, and thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and hope to see you soon.
it was really fun. I'd love to just sit and enjoy some wine with you all someday soon. And
That would be nice too.
Conversation. So let's aim for that. And
Let's do it.
go check out that CDFA definition and come on August 22nd and give your input or just read it and submit written comment. Yeah, it'd be good. Your comments are welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. Oh, and say hi to Joy for me, please, Craig.
Okay.
My regards to
I will.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
We are happy to share this podcast from Troon Vineyard, a Demeter biodynamic and regenerative organic certified winery in Oregon's Applegate Valley. We farm like the world depends on it by growing produce in our gardens and naturally crafting authentic wines. We will be sharing these in-depth podcasts several times a month. To learn more, I encourage you to visit our website at troonvineyard.com and those of the Regenerative Organic Alliance at regenorganic.org and Demeter Biodynamics at demeter-usa.org. Thanks for sharing our voyage to regenerative agriculture with us.